Welcome one and all to Freedom Reigns, Syncretism with Santos Bonacci. Thanks for joining, folks. Wonderful to be alive in this beautiful time that we're living in. We are certainly right into Aquarius, and it's absolutely beautiful to be alive. Today I have three guests, as I announced yesterday. I've got Lisa, Bob, and Chris joining me. I will welcome those in a minute. I just want to remind listeners, if you weren't tuned in yesterday, that this will be the last show that I do on Freedom Reigns, and I've been very, very appreciative and thankful of the opportunity. I appreciate every opportunity I get, and this has been a great opportunity presented to me by Diatra, and I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. I must move on because I do now have commitments in other languages, and I've always wanted to have an opening into Italy, and as most of the listeners probably know, I have had an opening into the Latin American with Johnny Guzman at Ecuador. With Johnny Guzman, sorry about that, just a little interruption, at Ecuador, and I've probably got about 30 presentations there, 1-hour interviews. So, but that's coming back on, and I'm very, very happy to announce that on Friday mornings, my time, I do Spanish, and Thursday mornings, my time, I do Italian. Now, most of you won't be interested in those languages, of course, but if you know friends or people that are stuck in sleepy land and have a good heart and a good mind and would love to know the answers, please put them onto my work. And I just hope that listeners continue to support Freedom Reigns. And of course, Diatra's always got excellent hosts, and that's all wonderful. So thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy today's show. Guests, are you there? Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Santos. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Morning.
Yep, good morning. Thanks for joining. You're in Australia. Chris, you're there. You're in Australia too.
Hi, Santos. Good morning to everybody. Yes, not in the same place as Lisa because it's a big country, but yes, closer to you actually, Santos.
Oh, yeah, we're only 20 minutes away from each other. So that's good, and much appreciated for sharing. And we've got Bob over in the States. You with us, Bob? Now, I think Bob's having a bit of a struggle getting on, so we'll just patiently wait for Bob, and we can kick it off, guys. What do you think? Probably Chris. If can we do some? Well, put it this way. First of all, folks, we're talking about the Public People's Trust 1776.org if you want to get on the internet and learn more about this trust. We are now under a new trust. The group that has developed this and brought it to the world is a small group of people that hopefully we can have join us, but they have perfected a superior trust to the Vatican's and Rome's trusts and papal bulls, etc. We have a perfected superior trust. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about how we can take advantage of that, of course, and everything else. So, Chris, would you like to kick off, or do we have Lisa with the history?
Well, if Lisa wants to speak for a minute just about the sequence of events since the 25th of December, and what she knows of the history, because she's had a little bit of direct contact with one of the trustees and has probably got a clearer picture than most people would have.
You think so?
Yes. For what we've got, yes.
Well, we all know this went public on the 25th of December, and it took probably a week, I think, for word to really get around amongst the alternative media crowd, and for people to get our heads around what had taken place. And this has been a process that Heather, one of the trustees, has been going through for the last, say, 3 to 4 years, and used the process of foreclosure, used her own house, in fact, as the guinea pig for this, and used the process of foreclosure to take this case up through the system. Not too dissimilar to what James McBride did, using foreclosures. But they ended up in different places and using different processes. And where Heather ended up was with the UCC. And well, that's interesting. I just heard the Blog Talk Radio thing again. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, yep, still loud and clear.
Okay. For some reason it started coming through the computer again. Now, the situation that we seem to find ourselves in at the moment with these filings with the UCC is that they, as at today, they stand unrebutted. Now, most people who have done any kind of study with strawman and law and trust law and commercial law know that any claim that stands unrebutted becomes law, which is how these trusts started in the first place. And in order to now rebut them, from what we can make out, they have to do one of two things. They either have to invalidate the UCC, and by doing so they actually invalidate themselves along with it, or they have to rebut these documents, which they can't, simply because the overwhelming evidence is there. So they're caught in a catch-22 at the moment, the powers that were.
Yeah, and can you explain why it is that if they rebut them, then they will be basically standing against UCC, which they really have to be supporting, right?
Because UCC is the basis for all. Oh, Bob's with us too, by the sounds of things.
I think so.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Oh my goodness, I made it.
Welcome, Bob. How are you, brother?
How you doing, Santos? Great to be here.
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Actually, Chris can probably answer that question better, Santos.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, look, that's no problem because we've got plenty of time, no breaks, 2 hours straight. Welcome, Bob, and thank you for joining us. Now, what I've done, listeners, is I've gathered a small group of people that probably have the most knowledge, because People's Trust has only been out since December 25th. So we're all trying to learn as much as possible about it, and it appears that the guys that put it together are very, very busy. And would it be true in saying, guys, that they're probably spread out all over the world and keeping low profile at the moment? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I believe so. I know that one of them is in the United States. Another one is in Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
Where the location of the third one, I'm not sure.
Alrighty. So let's do a bit of history then, Chris, if you can help us through that, and how I have heard a bit of Heather Tucci speaking, and how they went into court and tested out how the magistrates and judges are working in cahoots with the bankers. So they discovered all that, and of course Heather was a lawyer, and so good background in law. But I did learn how she went into court many, many times just testing things to see if this would work and that would work, and eventually they exposed and revealed and understood how the whole system works, and then they set about a plan to perfect a superior claim against it. So if you can do that, Chris, that'll be great.
Okay, well, you just about stated pretty much what I know too, Santos, because we really need to understand that there will be a time when assuming all goes well, which we absolutely hope it does, that the trustees come forward and tell their own story in their own words in great detail. And the information we've got at the moment from Heather, from that interview, and a little bit of stuff directly from Heather, is that the three trustees have been involved in UCC law for a long time and had a great understanding of it, and also a really deep understanding of how the powers that were actually using UCC to control the whole financial system at a very high level, including, we think, we did a little bit of cursory research on universities in this country and finding it difficult to find any references to teaching UCC in the curricula that we looked at. Now, we didn't look at all of them. We didn't find it anywhere, so we're kind of concluding they've kept UCC law inside the corporations and only teach it to people who actually have to use it in real life. So the only other people around the place who have experienced UCC law to any great depth are people like Heather, and there will be people like Winston Trout and all the other guys who've been doing sovereignty and strawman type work for many years, because ultimately they all end up arriving at the door of UCC and starting to try and use it. Not with a great deal of success from what we've gathered, and one of the reasons for that is that I don't think they, unless you're an operative in a corporate in UCC, I don't think you get to know much about it unless you find out the hard way, and for some people that's been quite hard. But the trustees sound like they were on the inside. They were doing corporate work in UCC and built up enough experience, and at the same time got a grip on how the powers that be were actually operating behind the scenes with UCC law, and decided what they appear to have done to us is set a massive trap, which the powers that were seem to have walked straight into. And based on incidents, information that's come up over the last week, we suspect the trap is about to completely close. And one of the things you need to understand about the UCC filings is that there's a sequence of events to it. The first thing to say about their website is that their website is not actually for public consumption. It was never really intended to explain to the people what the trustees have done, how they've done it in any great detail. It's actually the trustees publicly noticing the system as to the fact the filings have actually been completed up to a certain stage. And that's a requirement of the processes they were carrying out. They had to actually complete the public noticing, and what they did was simply tell us that where the site was, and there was stuff on it, and that's what happened on December 25th. Our attention was drawn to this site where they'd been building up these filings. To examine the filings is a hard read. There's absolutely no doubt about that. They're all written in complex language. It's a mixture of legalese and English, and it takes some time to get the hang of actually, where to find the good bits in the documents, because there's a lot of repetitious stuff, a lot of cross-references to other documents. It's all pretty heavy going, but if you can get your head around some of it, then you can start to see what it is they've actually done. And it's relying completely on the standard kind of administrative process that many people who have been involved in dealing with corporations, because all the government's corporations, is in fact to make a claim against them and ask them to rebut the claim within a certain period of time, or they'll default. And then after the first period of time has elapsed, you actually notice them that they're in fault and remind them that they've been asked to rebut this claim, and if after the second time period they don't rebut, you actually put them into default. That's the very basic administrative process, and the UCC is a version of that. And I think the timing's a bit different, and certainly the terminology is different, but it's the same process. And once they're in default, in the case of a normal situation, just you and a corporation, you could go to a court with the documentation and ask for a summary judgment. In the case of UCC, it appears that it actually stands in law at that point until there's probably a process where you could attack it after the final default if you were the defaulter, but we're not clear on how that's done. But what is clear is that the trustees set up a sequence of situations where the powers that were in a position where they would default if they didn't rebut, and they didn't. So as far as we can tell, the document stands in law. Yeah, jump in, Bob.
One important thing for people to understand and to realize when you're talking about the Uniform Commercial Code, the Uniform Commercial Code is the Bible when it comes to commerce. And one of the things in this whole history, one of the things that Heather was working on, she was actually investigating certain papers, documents, and claims that were made for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And when she started to see a lot of the fraud that was going on, and understand everything in our world, in our system as we know it, is commerce. The government is all based on commerce. The court system is all based on commerce. The judge sits on a bench. When you look that legal term up in your Black's Law Dictionary, you'll find that bench actually means bank. They are administrating commerce. And so all the laws of the land eventually comes back down to the Uniform Commercial Code, the law of commerce. The world has become a market. And this is one of the things that you must understand when you're talking about the principles of law in our current system. It's all based on commerce. So anything that is entered into the Uniform Commercial Code, I mean, and you're talking about a mountain. It's probably a library unto itself. Just that if you were to print the code out, you probably would fill a whole bookshelf. I mean, you're talking about a mountain of statutes and codes that is very, very explicit and extremely precise in dictating how trade and commerce should be interacted internationally. So by filing these documents under the UCC code, and this is what they use as the basis for everything that they do. When they foreclose on your home, if they foreclose or they take your car or anything like that, they're using that same UCC process. So to a lot of people will say, oh, well, I've never heard of UCC and these filings don't mean anything. To invalidate the UCC filings would invalidate the entire system. It would invalidate all foreclosures. It would invalidate everything that the IRS does. It would invalidate tax collection. It would invalidate all of that because they're all governed by these laws. So they picked a forum with which to operate in that everyone around the planet recognizes. And this is something that is a public registry, so that once it becomes part of the public record, and if you know anything about law, when a claim is made and becomes part of the public record, when it is unrebutted, it becomes fact. It becomes true. And these claims are extremely explicit in what they're stating, that they are running private money systems. They are operating a slavery system, using debt and controlling the masses through commerce. And these claims that they're made are very distinct, and they can't really be rebutted. And another very interesting thing about these documents, why they're so, what I would say, bulletproof, is because they take the tact of making the claim that the original trust, and we're talking about trust law, whenever you're dealing with the transfer of any kind of property, you're talking about trust law and contract law. The original trust was between the Creator and the beings on earth. The Creator is the one who grants everything. And these documents literally tie us back to that original trust. The earth was given to man to dominate, to take care of, to be custodians thereof. And every human being, therefore, as a living, breathing man, woman, and I'm including both, you are an inheritor of that trust. You are a beneficiary of that trust. Everyone gets a portion of that trust. And no one can stand between you, yourself, and your Creator. There's no other authority. So we're asking them, do you have a claim higher than the Creator's? You can. And thus it becomes unrebuttable.
Now, does this go back, Bob, to the papal bull Unum Sanctum by Boniface VIII?
This goes all the way back to, you're talking about all the way before that.
No. Yeah, I know, but see, UCC and the Vatican and Rome and the whole system is actually, they're operating under a papal bull. Of course, that's the maximum authority they've got, right?
You're talking about.
Well, as you said in the beginning, it's superior to that trust. It's superior to that claim.
Right.
That's right.
That was the original claim. The Roman canon law and the papal bull, they made the original claim that they had gained the world through conquest, which they had.
Yeah,
and it stood unrebutted.
Yeah, exactly. So no one has perfected a superior claim since 1302, really. I mean, we know that they've had the game, since Nero's time and the Julian dynasty, and even before that, you can go back, and I've addressed all that, but the bulls are the ones that really, because that was the first express trust in history, 1302, according to, my research. So what do you know, Bob?
Well,
is that right?
In legal terms, yes, that was the primary claim. And everything, like they say, all roads led to Rome. Well, that's still true today. By and large, the Vatican is the largest holder of wealth in human history. So, yeah, all roads lead to Rome. But what they've done, what Heather is talking about by going back to prime, she's going all the way back to the dawn of creation.
Of course.
There's essentially been a reset. The system's been reset to prior to any of that.
Indeed. One of the places we can start at, just to sort of try and get into people's minds what the process that took place. It actually began. I missed a bit of the conversations because I had to do something, but I'm hoping I'm not repeating anything anyone said. The process began, really, there were some initial filings, but ultimately the thing that really kicked it off was the trustees resumed and reactivated the original public trust created by the original Constitution of the United States and then abandoned. And they rebonded themselves, or they bonded themselves to the trust, but they bonded the trust to the Creator. And the result is that the only players in this game, in this trilogy of this trust, are the Creator and the trustees and us as the beneficiaries. There's nothing else in play here. There is just that trinity, if you like. Would that be an accurate statement, Bob?
Perfect.
Okay,
and this is when you hear, if you're going through the documents and she talks about everything has to go back to prime, this is what she means. It's got to go back to the original trust that the Creator made with man.
Indeed. Now, the thing about that is that's never occurred before on this planet in terms of an organized government. The trusts that the Catholic Church created, and I saw some details on the trusts originally, but I don't think they were structured the same way. Have you researched the actual structure that the Catholic Church trusts created, these Sesti KV trusts, Bob?
Yeah, the Sesti KV trusts were, and you're talking about, again, Babylonian slave system. It is if you study slave systems, this is probably the worst form of slave system ever devised. Because what it literally does is people unwillingly consent to their own enslavement. And when they do that, when they basically your sweat, your love, your blood, your labor, anything that you may produce in life has been monetized. You, the living, breathing person, you have a monetary value according to them. And that monetization is set up in certificates and trusts that are held unknowingly by you, and you consent to it. And in this whole slavery game, there's only one winner. It's rigged that only the bank can win. The house always wins.
Yep. Now, just to resume sort of the sequential nature of our explanation, and I sort of apologise in advance for the complexity of this and the length of time it takes to explain, but we really need to make this clear to everybody exactly what we think has been done. Once the trustees had resumed the trust and expressed themselves as trustees, and if you are logged onto the website, read one of the trustees' bonds. They're all the same. Just read one of them, and there's some brilliant stipulations for the commitment these people make. And one of the aspects of the whole People's Trust is the complete personal responsibility that everybody takes as part of in their role as the trust. Whether you're a beneficiary, whether you're a trustee, you're actually on your own recognizance. You're completely responsible for yourself, and you're completely responsible for ensuring the free will of others in that process. And again, this is something that no government structure that I've ever seen or heard or read about is like. It's all of the other government structures, and this is directly what Bob's referring to, are slave structures where there is a chain of authority that comes from the top, and essentially you have to follow their rules. None of that here. We're actually on our own recognizance as beings, and one of the things you'll see mentioned in the documents is universal law, as well as UCC law and common law, which are the three elements of law they've introduced into the entity they've created in the form of the trust itself, and the entities that can be used by the beneficiaries to assist them in having a community run, which is called CVAC, which we'll have to touch on later. Personal responsibility flows all the way through it, and the basis of that is from universal law, that we have free right of will to carry out any act we want to carry out, provided it doesn't impinge on the free will of any other being. Now, when you think about that, that covers the 10 Commandments on steroids. That's what it's all about. That is the universal law, and the trust begins and ends in that concept, that no being is actually able to infringe on the free will rights of another being. And the other main concept involved in setting up of the trust is that every state of being on the planet, and that's the way they refer to humans, as a state of being, every state of being on the planet has equity. We are all equal in the eyes of the trust. We all have equal access to the assets of the planet, which they've stipulated as all the gold and silver, and we have right of access to the assistance mechanisms that ultimately would get set up by this trust when the whole process is fully enacted. And you could call those.
Whenever you ever heard of a government referred to as an assistance mechanism?
Yeah, well, you haven't, because it's not. I don't even want to use the word government, because one of the definitions I've seen of government is mind control. Govern, mental, govern, control. There are others that argue it means different things, but mind control is a good way of actually putting it, because they trick us into believing that they're in charge. When you look at governments, really, the people should be in charge of them at all times, because they're our public servants. But that's not the way governments have been practiced so far under the Babylonian system. We know all about that because we've lived it our entire lives. This is a completely different way of operating and a completely different way of thinking. And this is the thing that struck us first when, in that first week after these were filed, was sort of looking at the way the trust was structured on this basis and the way the CVAC entities actually work, going, well, this is pretty much a wish list of what, if we could flick a switch and turn off all the crap and go to another system, this ticks virtually all the boxes, and boxes we haven't even thought of. And this information is all in the documents, but as we all know, it takes a bit of work to actually find the information. So one of the things I'd like to touch on now is what this what this series of filings isn't, and this is something that Lisa and Bob and myself have discussed at length. We sort of got a picture of what the trust is, and we also discussed what it isn't. Okay, well, is it a scam? Well, have a look at the huge amount of work in these filings. Why would you bother? Is it a scam because they're making money? Well, no one's asked for any money at this stage, and someone at some point somewhere on the internet, and I'm not sure where it came from, claimed it was a scam because you had to pay $15 to get verified versions of the documents from some service in some state in the United States, which turns out to be a standard commercial service if you want a copy of any UCC document, so no scam there, folks. There's been no legal opinion offered from any quarter on any aspect of this apart from Judge Dale, who contributed anonymously to our knowledge by earlier in the year putting out a long discourse on all of the shenanigans in the legal fraternity that he was aware of, which was extremely interesting and revealing. He actually did have a look at these documents and felt they were what they appeared to be. So we're not seeing any signs of it as being a commercial scam. Is it a distraction? Well, it's certainly distracting us, but there's no fear attached to this. Okay, there is only positivity attached to this. There's hope attached to this. False hope? We don't think so. That's not what we're thinking at the moment. The game is still in play, and the trust has yet to be physically manifested publicly, but we feel it's still moving in that direction, and so we can't see any reason not to speak to it as if it's real, because the stuff in here, once you get your head around it, is just 20 years ahead of where I thought we would be, because I thought we were in for a long, long battle against the powers that were to try and get them out of the system. And what it effectively does, and I'll kick it back to Bob and Lisa to talk to what the trust is and if they want to, because what it effectively does is give us something that at this stage we could have only dreamed of. So, Bob and Lisa, do you want to speak to what the trust isn't and why you think it actually is what it appears to be?
Well, what I think that the trust isn't, it's not a new. A lot of people have this whole fear. Oh, well, it's the new world order and it's just in a different form. Absolutely not. What it's literally done is it's removed all mechanisms of control and placed that responsibility back into the hands of the people. So no one could unless you create a new world order, or we the people create a new world order, it's not that. It is not a new system, it's not a new hierarchical system of governance. It is more of a system of guardianship, I would say. The structures that they have put in place basically have the role of guardianship to make sure that everything remains transparent and that nothing is used that is not for the benefit of the people. Anything that goes against the benefit of the people is strictly forbidden. So you're talking about a completely new paradigm. You're talking about a completely new way of looking at ourselves. Number one, that we are divine beings, and looking at the way that we govern ourselves and the way that we take responsibility for our choices. And it's all about the ability to make those choices freely. And when you read these documents, basically anything that hinders your free will to make your choices in life have been removed. Anything that has stood in the place between you and your Creator has been completely removed, foreclosed, terminated, caused to exist, ceased. This is the first time in human history where we actually have documents that not only validate, our basic unalienable rights, but codifies it in such a way that it cannot ever be taken away without your consent.
So Bob, to feel the benefits of this trust, because people would love to feel. I mean, imagine some of the listeners would be, in situations in courts, fighting for this, fighting for that, probably mortgage, and they'd love to feel the effects of this. In order for the world to benefit sooner rather than later, what would be the best way? What would be the best way to do that? Obviously, get the word around, right, that we're under this new trust. So, any suggestions there?
Well, disclosure is extremely important because people need to know that this has been done for them. We talked about this a little bit earlier privately. When the Berlin Wall came down, or when the order for the Berlin Wall to come down was first given, people didn't automatically just start crossing over. There was still a lot of trepidation. There was still a lot of fear. And it wasn't until this young man, about 21 years old, jumped up on top of the wall, and everybody was like, what are you doing? And he's looking around, and the police are also looking around, what do we do? And they weren't getting any orders from their superiors, and nothing was being done, so he jumped over to the other side. And when the others saw, he made it over and he was not harmed, then everybody started to crawl up on this wall, and within 5-10 minutes, they were literally tearing it down with their hands, literally, tearing the wall down. And this is, I think, where we're entering into. This has been done for you. Now, the announcement has been made. Look, this is what we have discovered. The fraud is real. It has been documented. It has been codified. These powers that were are, by their own consent and by not rebutting the claim, they are admitting to it. And you need to think about this. A lot of these people are named by name. You're talking about government leaders and officials, owners of the Bank of International Settlements, the United States government, and all the various different forms of state governments around the world have been accused of running slavery systems, accused of treason, and I'm talking high treason, which is punishable by death in most countries. Okay? And these claims were made publicly. Now, if someone accused you publicly of murder, treason, and running slavery systems, it would behoove you to rebut those claims rather than to allow them into the public record. I mean, can you imagine, Santos, someone accusing you of doing these things and you have nothing to say about it? And this is exactly what has happened. They had nothing to say about it. There's really... Excuse me?
I dropped for a few minutes, so I don't know if you covered this, but a couple of minutes.
Breaking up a little bit, Lisa. I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Not very well. Not very well. Come back in 5 minutes, Lisa. Hang on to the thought, sister, because you're breaking up severely. Can't hear a thing. Continue there, Bob.
Yeah, actually, I'll just take up the story for a sec, Bob, because what you're saying is absolutely spot on, that they had to rebut and they didn't. What I'd like to do is just quickly finish the sequence of events, just so people can understand what happened after the trustees took up the trust and joined us all to it. They created an entity, a legal entity they called the debtor, and they rolled into this entity the entire system. All the bankers, all the corporations, all the government corporations, the whole lot. And at that point, they put a document out called, and you'll find this in the orders menu on the site, Order of Finding an Action, where they actually define this debtor and specify that this debtor has been committing deceptive acts and practices for a very long time, and in fact, ultimately they end up, as Bob said, accusing them of treason. And the sequence was set from that point onwards. Once the accusation was made, there was really a requirement to rebut, which they didn't do. They actually the next step was to actually technically suspend all of these entities for failing to comply, then actually ordering them to do an audit, which they also ignored. And then there was an order of finding, which is essentially putting them on notice that they're going to be foreclosed on. And then there was an order of termination, which actually shut down the whole lot for cause. And the cause was failure to rebut treason against us, against the one people. And it was in the end, overall, it's a relatively simple concept. They were basically accused of something they didn't rebut, which in their own system's terms is acquiescence. It's actually an admission. And beyond that point, the remedy that was demanded was this, that the assets of the planet were surrendered for the use of the people, and that the system was terminated. So when the final filings were made, two things happened. Actually, three. The assets were secured for humanity. The entire corporate system, technically, on paper, in the UCC, was terminated, cancelled, shut down, foreclosed, all debt wiped. It just isn't there anymore, folks, technically. And they also created and brought into life the first of the entities they call CVACs, which are the assistance entities, which are here to facilitate our use of our birthright, which is the assets of the planet. And that's ultimately what we have, is that right of use of the planet. So that's the underlying process that's taken place, and there's lots and lots of detail in there and lots of things to talk about. And we will move on to the concept of the CVACs in a moment. But I just want to make sure that Bob wanted to complete his thought. But I did want to jump in and just finish that part of the picture for people, Bob, just so they could understand the steps that had taken place. I'm throwing it back to you, Bob. Sorry about that.
No. And you're absolutely right, because in order for you to really comprehend, the level and what has actually gone on, because these public filings, they are public. They're exactly that. So anyone can use them. Anyone can reference them. And to date, no one has been able to rebut them. So they're not only just filed there, as a mechanism for shutting down and closing on their charters, but they're also filed for public use. So anyone can reference these documents as international law. They have been convicted. They are guilty of treason, unrebutted, standing in public record documents, numbers, and they give a whole list of the different numbers which you can download. So what people need to do is, number one, understand that this has been done for you, and if all you need to do in order to take advantage of it is to identify yourself as a living being of the Creator, one of the people. By making that claim, you have identified yourself as not part of, because there's only two parties involved here. You're either part of the debtor, or you're one of the living beneficiaries. And everyone is given that option, even the powers that were. Are you going to be part of the quote unquote what's listed in the debtors and therefore guilty of all the charges therein? Or are you going to be one of the people? And this is a choice that everyone, because you can't get around free will choice. If you choose to continue to slave for the system, I'm sure they will more than accommodate you. Or you can make another choice and say, wait a second. First, before I accept anyone's authority, you prove that this isn't true. Prove that you have the authority to do anything that you're saying according to these filings. And this is people need to start to become like that 21-year-old and stand up on top of the wall, and understand and recognize that you are free if you choose to be.
That's it. I mean, the hardest thing we had to get our heads around when we were looking at these, we realised about a week, 10 days in, that the effect of these documents is to literally wipe the slate clean. Try getting your head around that. Okay? All the companies are still operating. They're all still sitting there. They're doing their thing. At some point in the hierarchy of those companies, they're right at the top most likely, there are people who know that this is going on. And they know that ultimately they can't stop what is to follow, which is we the people ultimately taking action on our own behalf based on the work that the trustees have done, and literally reclaiming our freedom.
I think
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I've been quietly sitting in the background reading a whole blurb that Heather's been sending me. I'm just kind of trying to get my head around what she's saying. She's still actually typing. And one of the things she said, I'm just trying to find. Where is it? This inauguration is the calm before the storm. Get ready. A storm of love and peace. But, yes, a storm nonetheless. Now, what we've taken from what's led up to today's inauguration is that by going through this process, this inauguration as they've always done it and just repeating what they've always done, results in a couple of things. That being that if the One People's Public Trust, and we haven't had confirmation on this, so this is speculation by us at this point, that whatever oath was taken today has been or will be very shortly registered as being an oath to the people, truly to the One People's Public Trust. So I think, as Chris put it earlier this morning, he could have got up and said, I'm a black duck, and it would have been registered as an oath for the One People's Public Trust. And one of the other comments here is that the powers that were are in fear. Fear is most paralyzing for some. In fear, they tend to do as they have always automatically done, because they are so filled with fear there is no room for anything else. Look closely, you can see some of them going through the internal, eternal euthanasia process. There's a lot more that she's written here, but I need to read it and get my head around it before I even try and share it.
Yeah. Okay, well that's really interesting news, Lathan. And one of the things I'd like to touch on, just so not to jump on you, Santos, we are going to discuss actual processes that we think would work using these filings, folks. I know that's where Santos wants to head to, and we are getting to that. It's just going to take just a touch more discussion. So.
And one thing I think it's important to note in all of this, so that people understand some of the work that was involved in making all of this happen. It's not that these people don't know, that the powers that be don't know. They've literally, in some cases, gone to their houses. You understand? They've been to the houses of the Rothschilds, literally knocked on their doors and informed them, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. So it's not that they don't know. They have been told, they have been informed directly in some cases, about all of the things that are going on and what has taken place. So this is not one of those, things that somebody has just filed and, willy-nilly and, everybody can just ignore. This is not one of those cases. There's been a lot and a lot of people and a lot of time and effort that's gone involved in making all of these filings happen.
Bob, I think your mic is a little low, so can you speak up a little bit more in your mic, please? I got that in the chat. Enforcement is one of the big questions here coming through that I can see. Enforcement? I mean, I'm not really...
It's always one of the big questions, no matter what process. It's like, how do you enforce it? And there is UCC filings that deal with the military and enforcement. But I believe we need to also start a ground roots campaign of enforcement. And by what, I don't even know if it was Chris or Bob that just said it, and essentially, if we start acting as if we are free, as if there is no one between us and the Creator, which is clearly the truth of the matter, UCC filings aside, and put the onus on them. Prove to me that you stand between me and the Creator, that you have authority over me. You prove it. The system has constantly put the onus on us to prove who we are and what we are. And with or without the One People's Public Trust, I think that's where we stand right now. Is we need to turn the tables on them and put the onus back on them. Because if a judge or a cop or a local councillor or anybody else, a politician, is going to stand there and tell you what to do, then and demand, some kind of action on your part, put the onus back on them. Prove that you have the authority to do this over me, that you are above the Creator.
And another thing, like Heather said, everybody's suffering under this system. It's only a fraction of a percentage of the population that actually benefits from this system. Your average soldier, your average military, your average law enforcement, police officer are suffering just as much as we are. And they also need to be aware, and I believe, like you said, at the highest levels, they are aware. But I'm talking about, at your local, clerk and police officer, they also need to be made aware that this is what has happened. And that really, that is up to us. That's up to the people.
Absolutely. And I just want to make one point, which relates back to what we think the trust isn't, but it also relates directly to what Lisa and Bob just said in the way that we need to actually to view what's taken place. Someone made a comment on one of the blogs we've been monitoring over this issue and other stuff, where they said, well, what are you people doing? You're just overthrowing the government, How dare you? Do you know what you're really trying to do? Have you got the right to do that? And to that I would have to say, if you understand what the governments actually are, that they are corporations that have overwritten sovereign nation constitutions by stealth and by commercial thuggery for the last 150 years, particularly in the 1930s, when they deliberately crashed the stock market, crashed the economies of many, many Western countries, and forced them all to sign up under a very sleazy deal with the IMF, which ensured they would never pay those debts off, and forced them to, what it does is actually forces countries to route their tax money out of the country before it really gets even back into the national treasury. And it's just mafioso at high level. It's just the financial industry going around throwing chairs through windows and then demanding insurance from you. What they do is they actually get a hold of the tax money from these countries before the national treasuries get it. We never know how much our GDP is. We only know what gets handed back to us by them. They've been skimming off the top of our national treasuries for generations. And you really got to get that, folks. This is not us overthrowing anything. This is simply us recovering stolen property. It's nothing more than a commercial. This is a commercial exercise, if you want to look at it that way. So I reject the idea that we're overthrowing any form of government. We're dealing with corporations, and those corporations are predatory, and it would appear they've been terminated. And if I'm sounding passionate, I am.
Beautiful. Are you there, Lisa? I hear someone in the background. Please continue. how does this relate to what Heather says about I am? I've discussed this in my presentations. You know, they want a name from you under the current oppressive system, well, the system that was, and how does the I am come into this? This is the attitude that we need to have going forward, friends, to know that you are. That's all.
Well, what else
is
there?
What else is there? There's nothing else.
What else
it's
is
just
there?
You are.
That's it.
And a name reduces you to one of their items, one of their commercial items. But you are cannot ever be encased in any object or item, and which is what you are not. We are. And so, talk a little bit about that, please.
Oh, that's a big subject.
Yeah, because
Bob,
you were saying before, Lisa, that we need to act as the free people that we are. We just need to continue now. This is the way forward, to know that you are free, be free, and act, or just not even act, just be free in all your dealings. Be free. And
it's
have no fear.
It's an internal process first and foremost. And one of the comment I was going to make earlier when I got cut off was, as Bob was talking also about the Berlin Wall, apparently when the American slaves were freed, it took up to a year for some of them to find out. So they were still living and being and thinking and acting as slaves long after they had been legally set free. And we're in a different time, and communication happens so rapidly these days, it's not going to take a year. But it's still a slow process. These documents and this information's been out now for about 4 weeks, and it's still a very small percentage of the population who is trying to get their head around them. Which is why I say we need a bit of a groundswell movement to start sharing this information with each other and sharing it with your family and your friends and your social networks and whoever you're connected to. But first and foremost, it's an internal process. And there are still, we've talked about this on our show several times, the idea of self-governance, of the relationship that you have between yourself and the Creator being the only relationship that governs how you act, how you be, how you do, is scary for some people. It really is. They like the boundaries. And we've been brought up with those for generations now, where we don't have to think for ourselves because there is a rule, there is a law, there is something to tell us what to do in any given situation. So you don't have to be responsible. You don't even have to think about it.
Good point.
And we're being asked now to start to think, to start to be completely and utterly self-responsible for our every thought, word, and deed. And not because there's a consequence in terms of a fine to pay or, prison time or, any of that rubbish. Not because those are the consequences, but because of the spiritual consequence to who I am. And that's where we all need to step into. So if those laws are gone, if those consequences are now not governing my actions, then what is? And it comes down to you and who you are and your relationship to your Creator.
Right.
Good. Beautiful.
Beingness is one of those things. It's quantifying your infinite nature. To be a being means that you are always existing. You exist in some form, always, all times, someplace. You exist. As soon as you put a name to yourself, you have defined. You have now become relegated from an infinite being to a finite being. That you fit into a category or a name, which you really can't. You really can't be. There's no. You are an aspect of the Creator. Therefore, you are infinite. You are a being. Now, you can identify yourself in certain aspects, and as far as identification is concerned, I go by the name of blah, 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 but ultimately, is that who you are? No, that is how I'm called. But who am I? I just am.
I do have another message from Heather, which she's asked for me to share. For those wondering about OPPT's response to the actions or inactions of the people that we can visibly see, like Obama, etc., it is the wizard and the big dogs behind the curtain that I am coming for, and they know it. In absolute love and peace, with absolute gratitude and grace, Heather.
Gotta love that. Because we've got to remember that what we see played out in public is theatre. The inauguration is in fact a theatre, because the original Constitution of the United States doesn't exist on paper, and the corporate constitution doesn't exist on paper. So what is that man standing there doing in front of 500,000 people?
Well, she just clarified Obama is not the wizard or the big dog, by the way.
No, he's just the guy out front entertaining us at the moment. I'm serious about that. He's literally a placeholder to keep our attention. Which is, there's nothing wrong with that. If he's on our side, fine. Someone's got to do it. Because one of the things people listening to this need to realise is that there are billions of people out there who are not party to this conversation, who don't even know about this yet. And one of our jobs in the next months and years is to actually fix that, is to actually, we think there'll be some kind of initial disclosure which could be fairly dramatic, but beyond that point, it's going to be up to us to help those around us understand what's going on and the choice that's been put in front of us, because it is utterly the most important choice that we probably have ever made as a group of beings on this planet, ever.
So we need to get this out as fast and as broad as possible out there in all of our social or media networks that we have, yeah?
Yeah, we do. And we've got to do it carefully because it's complicated. This is complicated stuff, and the game isn't over yet. It's still in play, and we're seeing it unfold in bits and pieces in front of us. And we're trying not to get too excited and trying not to set expectations for ourselves, but, we're humans and that'll happen, but we have to let this play out.
Well, it's actually getting less and less complicated as time goes on, because those initial documents, as was stated earlier, were not designed for us. They were designed for the system, and they were written in the system's language. The more recent documents even state the language of legalese is no more. And they're they're still very 5D, but they're not just swamped in legalese. So they're becoming easier to read, easier to comprehend, and people are even converting them again into an easier to understand language. And there are little groups all around the world who are working with these documents in various ways, whether it's to see what they can do in terms of using them to enforce their own personal situations, or just converting them into an easier language in order to be able to share them. It's happening all over the place.
Indeed. And look, there's one issue we've got to address too, guys, which we actually haven't touched on, and it's the thing that attracts people's attention in the first instance, like a bullet, but it's not the issue that they think it is, and that's this concept that everyone's going to get $10 billion to play with. That was never the intention of anyone involved in this process, because to hand out money like that would simply bring the whole system to a halt and would wreck the place. It's the equivalent of taking a baseball bat to your own china shop if you did that. And it's not going to work out that way. And we don't know exactly how the financial system will be handled, but you've got to bear in mind that the actions of the trustees actually erase and eradicate all the fictional debt, as well as the corporations that generated it. So don't be getting the idea that we will be suddenly getting this massive check in the mail or a gold delivery. That's not going to happen. And I think it'll, if you think about it for more than 30 seconds, you realise it has to be a carefully managed process. And if you look at the documents, you realise these people are not idiots, and they've been working on this for a long time. And I suspect that they will roll out something that, when we see it, we'll say, "Oh yeah, that's quite sensible." So you need to not be fearful of whatever debt you might think you're in, because you're actually apparently not in any debt. And B, just understand that we haven't had all of this rolled out to us yet, and there's still a lot of information to come. Any comments on that, Lisa or Bob?
Yes. The whole idea, and they did in the documents, you will find that they have called for restitution. There was an equity call, and secured, $5 billion in gold and silver for every man, woman, and child, and then $5 billion additional in gold and silver for reconciliation as far as damages are concerned.
And just to jump in, that's the value they stole from us, folks. That's what I was talking about before. So continue, Bob.
Yeah. Now that value, and Heather will also repeat, and if you listen to her interview, she'll say it again and again. That value is merely a scratch of the surface, because really, what value does anyone have? Who knows? Your value is infinite. Who knows who's going to invent the next mechanism for interstellar travel? It could be anyone. Somebody could invent that by accident in their garage. It happens all the time. Who knows who has what value? So everyone must be given infinite value, infinite potential, because that's where we all are. We all are infinite beings. So don't let this the numbers and the money be a distraction, because that's just a scratch of the surface of what your true value is. And do we get to? Are we going to move back into another situation where money is used as a mechanism for control? No, that's not what we want to happen. I believe that in line of this whole documentation and the wording, what it does is it literally makes money irrelevant, and that's where we want to be, where money becomes irrelevant. You do and you do based on what you're being, and you should be allowed to be anything that you choose. So if you decide that you wish to be a teacher, okay, you are guaranteed that right, that choice, the freedom to be a teacher. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means I'm going to need to have a good computer. I'm going to have access to a library. I'm going to need transportation. I'm going to need all of these things. Well, those are all of the things that you're doing as far as what you chose to be, and that is your right. It's not something that you necessarily have to pay for. And this is a whole different concept of the way that we think about, because we've all lived in a system where money has been used to control us. Most of the choices that people make today are based on money. How many people are actually in jobs that they just love to death, can't wait to get to work? How many of you are in those types of jobs? Or are you in the job that you're in because it pays a certain amount and you have to pay the bills? Is that what you would really choose to be doing? Is that what you would choose to be being? Probably not. But our whole concept has been based on making ends meet and gaining, as much quote unquote money as we can. And that has been the dictator of all the choices that we make in our occupations, how we spend our time, or how we don't spend our time. How many would like to spend more time with their families, or just to go on vacation and see the world. You don't have those choices to make. And this is the state that we find ourselves in. So when we talk about what does it mean to be free, it means to be free, to be rid of all of those quote-unquote obligations. Because if all that you have in your life are obligations from moment to moment to moment, have to go to work, have to pay my taxes, have to do this, I have to do that, this is the definition of slavery. You have no choice. All you have are obligations. So what we're saying is all of those obligations are now removed. So now what do you choose to be?
That is a really, really confronting thing, because billions of us on this planet have just never been in that position before. And this is why it's taken us a couple of weeks to get our heads around the implications of what's happened. And as time goes on, we're seeing it just become more and more, momentous, the potential for change here. And all over the world, people are starting to get it. If you want evidence of that, if you go to removingtheshackles.blogspot.be, actually, removingtheshackles.blogspot.be actually is correct. Go back a few days. There's some writings from two people. One's in Croatia, talking about, we've got to decide what we want to be. What can we do with this freedom that we've been given? And there's another one from Iceland, restating the same thing from yet another perspective. So if you're sitting there thinking that you're alone in trying to grapple with this, you're not.
Chris, speaking of removing the shackles, Dee's actually just started listening to the show, so I've asked her if she wants to join in. We'll see what happens.
That would be great. That would be great.
Guys, some of the questions coming in now. One question: when can we see these documents? Who is bringing them forward? Yeah, they are. That's what I was thinking. We've already addressed that. The website that's up, People's Trust 1776.org. Is that org?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Okay. Those documents were not meant for the public, is what Chris said earlier. But you can go in and read them. They weren't written in an easy manner for everyone, just to for the public just to look at and consume in that way. Is that what you were saying, right, Chris? But I think these people might be talking about documents for remedies, perhaps. Is that what they're talking about?
Yeah, I'm sure they are, because that's people who've got problems now will want remedy now. Okay, now Heather released an initial batch of indicative material, is the best way to describe it, which you can get from American Kabuki or Kawila Pele's website. You'll have to hunt around a little bit for it, but it's about 6 or 8 documents. We've been through some of them in detail, and we can see the direction they're headed. Now, you potentially can use some of them as are, and others of them will have to be adapted. But I think what the trustees were doing was giving us an indication of the style of usage that they're recommending. And Heather has clearly said that it's up to us to actually use this and create our own remedies. And we've got an example of that we're working on at the moment, which I'll describe in a minute. But I'll just sort of round this out by saying that all over the planet there will be people who are looking at what the guys have done and we'll start using this. We're right on the cutting edge of this, folks. We haven't got a suite of documents we can roll out right now and here it is, fill in your name here, wave this at the judge there and all will be well. We don't have that. We're not there yet. We're on the way there, but we're not right there. Now, I just want to explain the thumbnail of the process that appears to be involved is simply this, that as part of a filing, and I'll talk about a generic filing you want to make to a government department or to a bank or whoever, is simply to say, you've made a claim on me, I am, let me start with I am a living human being, you've made a claim on me, yet I see that in UCC law, there was a filing which was recently unrebutted that claimed that you have mistreated myself and everybody else and were foreclosed upon and actually have no standing at all anymore. If you care to rebut that, then we can have a discussion. If you don't rebut that, then we have nothing to discuss. And in principle, that's what's going on with all of the documents that Heather's released. There is, as Lisa said before, you're making a claim over me. Before you can make any claim over me, you better rebut this UCC filing. And that should stop them dead in their tracks ultimately. But exactly how we're doing that is a process that we are going to have to work on, because freedom still ain't free. We're not going to get anything on a platter, and this is one of the bits we're going to have to work out ourselves. And there's plenty of people out there in the strawman movement who've used similar kinds of processes, but without the big thumping hammer that these UCC filings are or should be if they're properly used. If you reference these and say, yes, that's a nice letter you've sent to me with a very big number on it that you'd like to get from me, but first, before we have any further discussions, you better rebut this, because according to this, you don't exist.
And it's not only that they don't exist, but also rebut this, that there has been reported lots of people engaging in private money systems and slavery systems. Please prove to me that you're not one of those.
Yep. There's a number of ways you could go with this, folks.
Please prove to me that you're not committing treason by making this claim.
Guys, we've got a caller. Would you like to take some calls? Okay, let's go to... Okay, well, it's code 562. So, caller with code 562, are you there?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
I have been following this since December 25th, and I have, my question is, I'm hearing what you say, and I'm really grateful for this process, but I would like to know, are they going to give classes on how people can create remedies? And to spit it out bluntly, I just want to say to you that the police, if any of the things that you suggested, you said to the police, most of them would take you physically, hurt you, and force you wherever they wanted you to go.
Yep. Can I speak to that, Santos?
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah. Sorry, do you mind giving us your name?
Chris.
Oh, okay. I think I can remember that, because I'm Chris too. Chris, you're absolutely right, because at that level they won't have any idea what's going on, and that's a very, very common problem with anyone attempting legal remedy with the system as it stands, because behind every piece of paper is a gun. Now, one of the reasons we're not rushing into this is the one you're speaking of, and the advice that I've heard from many people in the strawman/sovereignty type movement is not to attempt to use these kinds of legal moves on operatives in the streets, on their agents in the streets, because they're not trained in it, they don't understand it. And the thing we have to remember is that they're one of us. They're actually in the same position that we are in relation to the people's trust. They just don't know it yet. So I have to tell this straight up now, and I'm sure Bob would agree and Santos would agree, do not try this in the street with policemen. The lowest down the system you should really might be a clerk of courts or a judge, if you actually want to actually bring it to the attention of a judge as part of a situation that you're in. But I really wouldn't go any lower, because they won't get it, and they're trained when they run across something they don't understand to stick a gun in its face and handcuffs on it and haul it off to somewhere where they can hand it over to someone else who'll make more sense of it.
I have a slightly different take on it.
Mm-hmm.
No, don't wait until you're in a situation like that.
Thank you, Lisa. Take it away.
Pay your local police station a friendly visit to work, and I just want to have a about this. You're not nothing wrong. You're coming in and have you been informed, through your hierarchy about any of this? If ask some questions to me. Preempt. Go down to, whether it's police, local court, or,
You're breaking up there, Lisa, pretty bad.
You might have to.
That's a relief, because I thought maybe it was me. And just to let you know, I'm an older woman. I'm a school teacher. I don't have problems with the law. Neither does my son. But he was in a situation where he took two friends out to dinner. They took a cab, because they were drinking with dinner. And his card was left at the restaurant, so he told the cabbie he would go up to his place and bring down the money. And when he walked out his door, there were 10 policemen there that handcuffed him.
What?
All I can say is, I can just sit here and shake my head at that. That's ridiculous behaviour.
Well, it gets more ridiculous. I'm not going to go on with the story, but he was never given a ticket. He was never charged with anything. He didn't do anything.
True.
But I'm just getting into the, and he's never been in any kind of trouble.
No, that's where this. That's a great example.
My question is, really, when will this get to the point, or we have enough information or help to really be able to move with this?
All I can say to that is this is a process. I would say within a month or two, there should be enough people around the planet working on this to get it to the stage where it can be used one of two ways. One will be noticing the system, telling the system, as Lisa suggested, going to the system and saying, this is a situation, and if you can't rebut this, then here are my terms and conditions for having a conversation with you in the future. And any time, and I'll speak about this in a little bit more detail in a moment, any time you want to interact with me, here are my prices. Okay, and we know they won't be able to rebut it. They won't like it either. But it really needs to be done at the right level of the system and in advance. And one of the concepts I'd like to move into people's heads is this is part of the action that we need to take to notice the system, that we know what's going on and that we're going to stand our ground. It's very dangerous to do that at street level. Your son was in a very dangerous position, and the last thing you want to do is provoke those guys when they're all in that situation. And one of the really important concepts that we've run across from another process that we're involved with called the Divine Province is that if we want to take this path, we have to go to peace with them. Okay, we're not going to be at war with them per se. This is not where we're going. We are going to peace, and we are going to literally walk away from the old stuff. We have to keep that in mind any time we interact with them. When we want to act proactively as much as possible when we've got the processes sorted out so that it can be done in a very civilized manner and kept at peace. And one of the things to always bear in mind is that people that you're dealing with are just another one of you. It's the classic in Lakesh. They're another one of us. They're just in a different place. And their knowledge and attitude is different. And it's part of our responsibility to try and move them to the right place when we're dealing with them. And I know this. I'm kind of talking theory, and you want to know what to do on the street. But
no, I don't want to know. Actually, this isn't on. I guess when you mean on the street, you mean with individual police people. He was completely compliant. He didn't cause any problems. That's probably, why they let him go. But I mean, they were certainly trying to push him to the point where he was non-compliant. But he stayed compliant. He's a smart person.
Yep. No, that's the best thing you can do.
But it did bring me to a different level with all of this. Because I hear stories from a lot of my students also, and about this kind of thing. And so I'm just trying to get really down to the real nitty-gritty of, when people want to move forward with this, which of course anybody would want to. Do you think that they're going to come out with some more information to help us get comfortable with it on how this is going to really look day to day for us?
I actually do. I mean, Heather keeps saying repeatedly that it's coming. More is on the way. All will be revealed. I think there's more. There's so much more.
Yeah. Look, one of the things that's required to really give this process traction is some form of widespread public disclosure. Now, for instance, we as a group yesterday were doing what Cliff I would call wild-ass speculation. He calls it WAS, wild-ass speculation, that maybe Obama would make some sort of announcement at this inauguration event. Now, it was silly of us to even think about that, because if you turn 500,000 people into 500,000 people who are scared or angry or whatever, you've got a real problem. It's just a mess. So it was even silly of us to even go there. But ultimately, there needs to be some sort of disclosure take place, because all these guys in government are sitting there and they know what's going on. It's absolutely inevitable. In fact, it's actually required of them. And once that process has taken place, then our individual actions will still be required, but will be that much easier. And we know that the trustees haven't yet released anywhere near the amount of sample material that I'm sure they would like to release to it. But I just keep telling people we're right on the cutting edge of this, and there's a couple of critical parts of the game still in play. So, unfortunately, patience is required still.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you. I mean, and I'm actually glad this happened with my son, because I kind of live in la-la land as far as, everybody's nice and everyone gets along. But I really realized that things can really be, there's a lot of abuse out there with our police and the people that are supposed to be in charge.
Yes, and that's why it's good when the system comes down on you sometimes, because it wakes you up. People are awakened by this, so they're doing us a favour, and that's beautiful. And the reason why they're doing this, and why would they have done this to your husband, caller, because we are in debt mode. Everybody's going around collecting debts. So since the trust, we have been out of debt, and we will see that these incidents will become less and less and fewer and fewer. Thanks, caller. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, and we've got another caller in the queue, and area 702. Can we take that one, please? We'll just go to caller 702. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
It seems to me that the thing that we really need to do is to get information out to people on a massive level. Now, the elite have done this with their mass media networks and have spent a lot of time and energy making sure that they program people's minds and through education, through the religious systems. They have programmed the human family to the extent that they have created the world that they want, and they have used us to do it. And people don't realize that it's the mass consciousness of all of us that will steer the course of our planet and what happens here. So, in my mind, and the project that I'm currently working on, is to create a massive mass media channel of our own, where we can begin to let the people know they do have a choice. They have the option of not cooperating with this tax debt slave system that is out there. And once even people who are completely unaware find out that they have a choice, that they can make a decision not to cooperate with a system that has, wreaked havoc and created nothing but suffering and pain for the vast majority of the human family. Once they know that they have a choice not to cooperate with that, we can end it quickly. Now, Gandhi showed us the way in India. He showed that by non-cooperation, the power simply crumbles. And imagine if 300 million people in the United States decided they weren't going to pay taxes anymore. What are they going to do? Nothing. So it seems to me that we've got to get behind a system, a mass media channel, to get information out to people so that they know they have a choice, because people feel that they're boxed in and that they have no decision that they can make. They feel helpless, but they aren't helpless, and we need to let them know that.
Absolutely. The biggest threat, if you want to call us a threat, to the powers that were, remembering that they're us too, then we have to deal with them at some level, is us, is our energy. Our energy is the value in this planet, and our attention, when focused, is ultimate. Bob referred to the Berlin Wall coming down. And when
Yes.
there's I was referring before to a disclosure event. We strongly feel that there is an imminent disclosure event which will be, it's been described to us as like trying to drink from a fire hose. That's what we're waiting for the appearance of, and that is presumably, if it's going to be of that nature, the actual mainstream media. But by no means stop what you're doing, because discussions like this and whatever you put out on your channel are absolutely pivotal in getting the attention of the number of people to get critical mass to make it a done deal. Because what the People's Trust have done is they've created a structure. We just have to step into it. It's not like we've got to fight and sort this out. It's actually been served up to us on a platter. This aspect actually has been given to us.
And that's precisely the type of information that people need to know and realize, that this exists and that we can use this and that we can then further our own cause. And if you would allow me to, I'd like to give my website, because I know that there are people out there who have financial wherewithal and are waiting to get behind something that's going to benefit the entire human family. And I would, if you would allow me to, I'd like to give my website address.
Sure, Santos. I'm sure you'd be happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ufntv.org, and that stands for Universal Freedom Network, and the acronym is UFN, Universal Freedom Network. So it's ufntv.org, and if people view my welcome video on the About page, they'll understand what this is all about. And I was guided to develop this and to bring this into fruition about 1.5 years ago from St. Germain. And I know that at some point that his trust and many of the other funds there will become available to us. But until then, we need to get the ball rolling, and I'm requesting assistance.
I just wanted to say, Santos, I haven't had that much input because I've been multitasking with conversations in the background here. And one of them is with Brian from American Kabuki, and he said that announcements are coming that will address all of the questions being asked by the callers.
Yeah.
And I think the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty intense myself.
Yeah.
Two-week time frame is what I'm getting.
Yep.
I would like to thank all of you for your incredible contributions to this whole process that we're trying to free the human family. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. But look, I've just noticed the time. Sorry to jump in there, Bob. Guys, I just want to quickly run people through just the bare basics on the CVAC stuff. So
before you get in there, Chris, D from removing the shackle. Yeah, D from removing the shackles is in the queue. If you can hear, if you can type what area code is you're
I've already asked. She doesn't know because it's
okay. Okay. How many callers do you have, Santos?
Well, I'll get onto that now. I'll pull that one up. Just continue there, and we'll have D in a few minutes.
Okay. Look, the other entity that they created with the filings is the assistance entities I've referred to. The acronym is CVAC. It's Creators Value Asset Centres. And the key thing to understand here is these are not government. These are very simple entities with the highest of ethical standards required of them. Excuse me. Complete transparency, complete accountability, complete personal responsibility, and don't be intimidated by that complete personal responsibility, folks, because you as a human are underwritten by all the value we spoke of. That $10 billion is the value that underwrites you when you're acting within our community. Now, what the CVAC does is it provides a hub on which you can build projects, on which you could build further methods of administration by process. Any hub that is created underneath the main CVAC, and there are 195 allowed for in the constitution of the CVACs for roughly 195 nations. Okay, the first one has been activated with Treasure as the placeholder. Sorry, with Heather as she's the treasure. Freudian slip. With with Heather as
I could heard that laugh.
with Heather as a placeholder. I need to finish this just so people understand. Heather as a placeholder, and what you need to get in your minds is this: that though there's 195 CVACs, they're all the same. You belong to every one of them. Every one of them is required to assist you in experiencing whatever it is you want to experience on Earth, and using your value to add to that experience. That's what they're there for. They activated the one in the US, and instantly everybody is a member everywhere. And if they activated one in Guatemala, we're also a member of that. Okay, so this is a 3D network that we're creating where everyone is linked to every aspect of it. And in relation to what happened with President Obama and his oath yesterday, where we suspect that President Obama is actually being bound by his oath to be president of the CVAC in place of Heather, which is what we're speculating about. Don't take me as that as fact. Let me just read you one of the specifications for a CVAC. Immediately it's established, and it's this. And I can give you the document number in a moment. To duly produce immediate, true, accurate, and complete full disclosure to said states of body, which is us, of absolute truth, knowledge, and the absolute standing, authority, value, rights, principles of law of said states of body, inclusive of disclosure of ULI document, blah, 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 which is the document that forecloses on the system, starting with the Bank of International Settlements. All verified ordinances therein, duly verified underwriting of creations, value, assets, Centre CVAC. If Obama is bound by an oath to the CVAC, it would appear to us, looking at this document, he's required to disclose everything. And Heather describes disclosure as a disclosure of absolute data, and in her definition, that is the truth about everything, leaving out nothing. So that is... If that is taking place behind the scenes now with the inauguration that just happened in the last 12 hours, then our new public servant, Mr. Obama, is required to disclose everything. That's what I think. That's what I personally think is going on in the background. I hope I'm right. That's my wild-ass speculation. I'll shut up now, and I just wanted to get that CVAC concept out there, and we'll let Dee come back with any new information she has.
Can I? Yeah, let's bring Dee in, please. Are you there, Dee?
I am here, hiding in the background.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we're looking
I'd be interested to see what her thoughts are on watching the inauguration, how she felt about it, what she noticed. One of the things that has been mentioned is there was a conspicuous absence of the Bushes.
Yes, there certainly was, wasn't there?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? Because we know the Bushes have been around for 40 years solidly since JFK, and we would expect that they would have a lot to do with Barack Obama, wouldn't they?
Have in the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am going to stand mute on that point for the moment. They were conspicuously absent. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, I think they are, this is my wild-ass speculation, that in those documents, sort of everybody's bundled, everyone's bundled under the one label of the creditors, or the debtors. They're now the debtors. And I think the Bushes are very high up on that list. And, Daddy Bush, it's been said, has been sick, out of action. There's lots of reasons for that, lots of speculation about why that is. But no public excuse for why Baby Bush wouldn't be there. There hasn't been. It was just ignored.
Exactly that. It was completely ignored. If you noticed, there was not even a comment from any newscaster even questioning why they weren't there. It was completely ignored.
I found that even more interesting than the fact that they weren't there.
Yeah, exactly. There were some very interesting things that happened.
And I went back and looked at the 2008 inauguration to see if there was any difference in the wording. And actually, the only difference between what Obama said back then and what he said this morning was the word faithfully. He didn't say the word faithfully. And that was it. That was the only difference.
Well, and in 2008, he also didn't say United States.
Oh, that's right. He fumbled on it. Yes.
I found that very telling, and I'll have to say I was talking to a friend of mine this evening, and I said I found that very telling, because the president of a country doesn't fumble over the name of his own country. There was something more behind that. That's just me saying what my gut reaction was instantaneously was like, oh, what was that?
Yeah, that's too significant.
Yep, exactly.
It was no fumbling this time.
Yeah, Dave, just one thing that I did pick up when the president and the entourage were walking down a set of stairs to the podium on camera, one of the commentators said, "Oh, they look like they're going to a funeral." Did you catch that comment? They were looking very, very serious.
Very serious and somber, and yes, and it was. I actually found that the emotions on the faces of everyone didn't fit. And at different points they didn't fit. Like, you'd look over, at one point they caught Bill Clinton, and he had this glare on his face. And then about 5 minutes later, again, the camera just panned slightly that you could see him, and he had this silly grin on his face. And at the same time, during a point of the inaugural speech, which was kind of a more upbeat, section of it, talking about hope and all the rest of it, and Michelle Obama's face was incredibly somber, like incredibly in opposition to the topic that was being discussed. And if you actually go back and watch the whole thing, I think you'll find that there was a lot of mismatched emotions and facial expressions through the whole thing.
It always is, isn't it, in these commercial things? It always is, because they're, they know that they've sold out. They've got allegiances everywhere. There's so much pressure, There's pressure from corporations that give them money. They've got to look good to them. They've got to look good to the people. They're stuck in the middle, these servants. But they put themselves in that situation, don't they? Because they're greedy for power. But then when they get there, it's a different story. They've got to please everybody because they find that there's stratas and stratas of control above them. So they look funny. You can see it.
They're top of the tree.
They're living in a phony world, so their faces are phony. The way they talk, it's all fraudulent and phony. It's not from the heart. There's a big disconnect from nature. They're unnatural. It's like intelligent animals going through ceremonies and all the other unintelligent animals clapping on and cheering them on and saying, well, these are the most intelligent of the animals amongst us, and hallelujah, And it's just all this moronic miasma of stupidity. It's all fake, it's all phony, it's unnatural. The sooner this behaviour stops on this planet, the better. We'll be free from this infestation of the Vatican-controlled, mind-controlled planet. What a sad, sad thing it was. And thank goodness that we've got the People's Trust, folks. This is beautiful. Since I've discovered it, I've been sleeping much better at night. We all lose sleep due to debt. Debt is causing every single vile aberration on this planet. Everyone thinks someone else owes them money or something, So once
but it goes beyond that too. But it's not just the financial. That's the thing. I've talked to a lot of people. I spent a lot of today on the phone and on Skype taking messages and talking to people. Yes, the immediate is the financial, the debt. That is everyone's overwhelming concern now is need money. Got to put gas in the car, got to feed my children, etc. But it's beyond that, because the money controls everything. It's the reverse pyramid, right? Money controls everything above it. So politics, the big pharma, the oil companies, the religion, it all comes under. It's all controlled through the money, and that's the whole thing. Is when you're dealing with that aspect of these people controlling the money and controlling the lives of people, they control the entire aspect from every side, from every corner. There is this control holding on to them, and that is what's disappeared and what is disappearing.
You know, Santos, my take on this at the moment is that, like I said before, with or without the One People's Trust, with or without the paperwork, this is an internal process. And essentially what we're going through right now is a spiritual process and realization. And if this initial step of grasping this, internalizing this, is the hardest part. And once we know and we feel within every cell of our body that we are free and that there is nothing between us and our Creator, how that then manifests in the world, in our own personal space and collectively, it will just steamroll. And there will be a domino effect, and it will have all kinds of ramifications in the 3D world. But it's going to have to happen internally first. And anybody who tries, I think, to use the documents or use a paper process of any kind without having first done that internal process will probably come up against a brick wall. And you'll see any of these strawman movements, any of these technologies that have come out in the past, there's always been a variety of results. One person's used the technique with absolute success. The other person's done exactly the same thing, ended up in prison. Why is that? And for me, the only explanation is because of where they were at internally. And they've tried to externalize it and put the power in the paperwork or put the power out there instead of within themselves.
That's exactly true, Lisa. I'm sorry I'm eating.
That's okay.
One of the things, you know, like if someone were to come up to you, you know, off the street and said, hey, look, you're going to do X, Y, Z, and you're going to do it right now because I said so, what would your reaction would be? Immediately, for most people, it would be, who the fuck are you? Right?
Exactly.
Yep, drop dead, dude.
You recognize that, hey, no one has the right to tell me what to do. When you start to embody that, not just with someone you see off the street, but with the police officer, with the creditors, with the bankers, with the judges, with the magistrates, right? And they say, hey, you owe, well, your first reaction would be like, who the fuck are you? Instead of the conditioned response that we have to authority today. People should be asking those questions. Who are you? What makes you think that you have the right to tell me what I should or could or can't do? You start to ask those questions. Who puts you in this position to have the right or say so over my life? And when you start asking those questions, you're not going to get the same response because they're not prepared to respond to questions like that.
That's right. That's right. Who are you? Because unless they've got a claim or unless you've hurt them, they've got nothing on you. Their little regulations are for them. They are the ones that are bound to them. So, look, guys, we've got about 8 minutes left. I'm so happy that we've been able to come together and share this with people. Please spread the word, listeners. Spread the word left, right, and centre, and let it be known that we are under a real trust. It's our trust. We own the lot. It's in our hands. And so can we go around, perhaps starting with you, Chris, and just any final words? We can go over and have it recorded after the hour, 5-10 minutes if we need to. So don't panic, but starting with Chris, what can we do, and perhaps just mention any other resources that people can go to. There is a few great interviews of Heather Tucci. She's the only one, I think, that has any audio out there, and there's a couple out there. If anyone knows what they are, please mention them. So, Chris, please.
Okay, look, folks, this is a really huge thing to get your head around. We've got to be patient. Give yourself time to think about what it actually means to take this step, because it's the biggest thing that ever happened on this planet. If you do want to read the documents, just one little useful thing to do is actually to read them out loud. The structure of the documents is such that at the start there's a preamble that defines parties, and at the end there's sort of a signature. The good bits are in the middle. And fish around in the middle bits and read them out loud, because then there's an energy to them that you will get. And it's quite an experience. So enjoy.
Beautiful. Bob?
The only thing that what I would want to say to people is to start imagining your future. Because everything starts in your own intent. What is it that you haven't allowed yourself to be? Where is it that you haven't allowed yourself to go because of constraints of money or obligation or whatever? How is it that you really want to live? What is it that you really want to do? What does freedom mean for you, and how are you going to embody that in your being and your doing? Because a lot of us, are not in the place that we want to be. A lot of us are not doing the things that we want to do. We're not doing the things that we choose to be. And we need to start to reawaken those things, because this is real. From everything that we can see, this is very, very real. And what does that mean for each and every one of us is that we have opportunities that we weren't aware of before. There are doors available that we can walk through that probably we would not have considered before. So I would say that, it's time to start to think about these things and where it is that we want to go and how it is that we want to actually move forward in the future. Because without the constraints and without the control and without the obligations and the systems of control there, then our world looks very, very different, and our future looks a lot brighter.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Beautiful. Words of wisdom. And Lisa, you have, please mention your show too, because you've already done an interview with, you've got a People's Trust interview out there. Share that with people. Tell people about your regular weekly show, and this is other ways of getting the word out there. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, was going to do just that. Well, the best resources really to try and stay on top of all of this information is Kawila Pele's blog, American Kabuki, and Removing the Shackles. Keep your eyes on those three websites. Also, we have Bob, myself, and Chris and Barbara have a weekly radio show and blog talk called The Collective Imagination, and we believe wholeheartedly that what we're seeing in the world right now is a direct result of the collective imagination. We've all put that call out for change. We've said enough. We've said it individually and we've said it collectively. And we're getting the change we asked for. Last 2 weeks' shows have been very heavily involved discussing the One People's Public Trust. Dee did join us on that last program. And it'll be, I'm sure, a recurring theme on our show for the foreseeable future. And I'll pass it over
2 minutes notice.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I'll pass it over to Dee now.
Yeah, no problems. We will go a few minutes over time. I've got another couple of callers. No more time for callers, folks. But if the two that are on in want to stay, we'll take them after Dee's comments now, and we'll go over 5 or 10 minutes, however long it takes. I do have another show in an hour's time, American Freedom Radio. Please stay tuned there, friends, because I'm going to be interviewing an Australian group here who are going to shut down, and they will shut down one of the local councils. The New World Order and Agenda 21 have decided that they're going to really try and implement their agenda down here at Melton, one of the biggest and poorest municipalities in Australia. It's only about an hour from where I live in the city of Melbourne, and they will give an interim transitorial model for how to deal with these bastards. So stay tuned, because they have got a beautiful, beautiful procedure. You will learn how to bring down your, the evil corporations that are destroying communities. In fact, she will recount stories of how rates have gone up from $1,000 to $19,000 in the city of Melton, due to what they call what do they call it when they rezoning? Oh yeah, rezoning. Great word. In other words, a way to extract more money out of dupes. So stay tuned for that, folks. It's going to be the model for going forward until everybody, the world, knows that the People Trust owns it all. So over to you, Dee.
Ah, yes. You know, the one thing I just want to talk to people about just briefly, because I know we don't have much time. As I said, I've spent all afternoon on the phone. And I have literally talked 3 good friends of mine down off the ledge today, because they were just like, oh, this is it. It's the end. It's over. I don't know what to do. The changes are tangibly right in front of us. And I know that a lot of people they've been worn down by the constant people saying, oh, it's happening, et cetera, et cetera. This is something very different. And it is going to become very, very clear, as I'm sure that you and Lisa have said, Chris, that the documents that the People's Trust have put out, they are difficult to read. You have to be in the right mindset and right heart set as well. You have to know that very, very soon, and I mean very soon, everything is going to be made very clear. There won't be any more guessing work or trying to decipher. It will be extremely clear as to what is happening, what has happened, and how things are going to move forward. The other thing I want to say is this. Talking about all the stuff that I've been talking about on removing the shackles, about what's been going on for the last month and a half. Everything that has happened behind the curtain has been directly affected by the People's Trust. Everything that's been going on, there are people literally running around in Washington, D.C. with their hair on fire right now. People in high offices throwing stuff at walls because they're so frustrated they don't know what to do. And we know for a fact that the White House is issuing orders to the press to not talk about the People's Trust and to not run with that story. So, you know what? I think you're right. I think it's time to get, one of the callers said, it's time to get the public's media going and bring it out there. Bypass the mainstream media or create a situation where they're forced to report on it because everyone else is around them. But yeah, I think
that's the only way to do it.
Well, it
force them to, yeah.
Yep, and this is it. We do have someone who is writing a petition to the White House. I'm going to be looking over that later on this evening if I can get to it. But this is it. It's going forward. Just literally get out there, tell the people, get it on websites. And I hate to say it, it's time to stop the bickering and infighting. It's ridiculous. This is the real deal, and this is moving forward. And it's time to get everyone behind it to move it forward en masse. And very, very soon, it is all going to be very, very clear.
Actually, in light of that, I'll just share with you what a message Brian left with me. which is that once the systems come undone, the people won't have to worry about trying to fight back. There will be nothing left to fight back against.
Exactly.
It's
one of the things I just wanted to kind of say was the fact that everyone wants the paperwork. They want to know how to fill it out. It's very confusing, yes. Very, very soon, that's not even going to be an issue.
Yeah, I had a feeling that would be the case, Di, that we're right on the edge of it, and you know, there are events coming that will just change the conversation completely.
Absolutely, that's the thing.
Yep.
We've got our good friend Thomas Hughes in the queue. Thomas, are you there? Please come on.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. How about yourself?
Yeah, the same. How are you enjoying the news?
It's enjoyable to hear it because, as a result, I have to tell you what coincides with this is the things that are coming to me and several people that I'm in contact with, because the beings that we've been working with, and some of them in the Andromeda Council, some of the Sasquatch people, and I know that's not relevant to what you're talking about at the moment, but it's relevant to me. We'll say this: they're preparing us to walk out of the third dimension, if you want to call it that, this reality, into the new reality. And we're going to be walking back and forth. The woman that's been dealing with the Sasquatch for over 50 years in Oklahoma, she's taken more information into her head over the last 2 weeks than she has in the previous 60 years of her life. So they're preparing us to move forward so that we can assist everyone as everyone comes through this. It's just it's a conundrum of constant repeating cycles, and it's coming to an end very quickly. That's what I wanted to say, and I hope I didn't get too crazy for certain people on the line here.
Not at all, brother. Not at all.
Tommy, is that you, Tommy?
Yes, that's me, Tommy.
Oh, I'm still waiting to share that bowl with you, buddy.
Well, I did send a video to Barbara, so I hope that she gets all again.
Yeah. Thanks.
I think you got it.
I can't really understand a word Thomas is saying. It's quite garbled at my end.
Yeah, it's kind of garbled. You know,
a video from me through Barbara she sent to you. We hear me that time.
There was a video.
For me.
I didn't understand you, Tom.
Really bad line.
Garbling that bad? Garbling that bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's Tom's show. I think he's suggesting that that you've been on there, Lisa. So you know, yeah. Anyway, look, hang in there, Thomas. Hopefully your line will come good in a couple of minutes. We've got another caller, and with the code 936. Stay there. Perhaps you might want to mute your mics, whoever's got their mics on. Just keep those muted, and the number is 936. Mic is open.
Yes, this is Greg calling from Nashville, Tennessee in the States.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
I'm good. I just want to say two thank yous. Number one, to you, of course, Santos, for opening my eyes to astrotheology here recently. It's just opened up, just exploded doors, as you well know, pulling a lot of the threads in and just making me see the bigger picture. And it's just amazing to me, especially how, you know, the planets and the chakras and everything about the human body, how you can tie it all into the Bible and all those other things. It's just phenomenal. I mean, it's like discovering Christmas for the first time, for lack of a better analogy. And the other thank you goes to Lisa, of course, for the Andrew Norton Webber interview on distilled water and rediscovering the importance of the purity of the human temple. Because I explored distilled water in the past, but still wasn't totally clear on it. and got away from it kind of unknowingly, I guess, but now have come back to it. So I just want to say thank you. And of course, the whole People's Trust thing is, it's so big. When I first heard about it, it kind of scared the daylights out of me about a year ago. The whole part about being sold to the state through the birth certificate system. I almost couldn't believe it because, truth was stranger than fiction. But I'm starting to see this come back more at a much bigger way. And now connecting to your teachings, you're down there in Australia. I didn't realize how global this thing had really become. And I just wanted to say thank you for that information.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you very much for the encouragement. Wonderful to hear. Yep. And and good on you, Lisa, for the good interviews you have there, continuing to bring the truth out to people. So it really is beautiful. And look, you know what? I'm suggesting we might have to do a follow-up of this. I've noticed in the chat that people are wanting to follow up next week because this is pretty big. So I'll probably talk to you about that off the air later. And you guys or anyone that wants to join in, please join in. But I probably will. In fact, 90% I'll be back next week to do a follow-up on this because this is really, really, really big. So I'll do one more, I think.
This is like God's farewell tour with Santos.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I am, but this does need a follow-up, and hopefully we can have more light to shine on the subject. Because
Santos, I strongly suspect that there's going to be stuff happening in the next week that will need to be discussed. There's bits we needed to keep going on today, but I think there's more to come, and it'll just get bigger.
Yeah, we can save a bit more for next time. I mean, we've established the basics today, and we've established a lot of pertinent facts. We are under a new trust. It has successfully trumped the 1302 Unum Sanctum Express Trust. That has been trust. This is a perfected superior claim. This is not a joke. This is our trust, and we can focus our energy to it because it is freedom. No more debt. The debt doesn't exist. It was always a fiction anyway. I walked away from debt, so I don't know, 7-8 years ago when I realised what was going on. So, and they send me the little papers, which I don't, necessarily pay any attention to. So I got out of that fiction. I've dealt with them in courts. I know what they're like. They always win. You always lose. And yet we make a win every time we go in there and show them that they are corrupt, and we're coming down on them, and we're starting to open our eyes and see that they, the ones that pretend to be just and righteous and good and kind and loving and administer justice in our courts, are nothing but a bunch of sly thugs. The bar has been a criminal organisation all along. No wonder we say that lawyers are liars. No wonder we say that barristers and judges, we don't trust them. Of course we don't trust them. What do they do other than send people to prison so they can get a kickback for doing it? 18-year-old boys, 19-year-old boys and girls into prison, throw them in, and they should be the ones that are going in prison, and they will. So this is a notice to the bar and the Jesuits and all the pedophile clubs out there. You will be imprisoned, the free will be set free, and you had better repent now, because it's already too late. You are already in default. You are already showing that you are criminals. You are already performing fraud on a daily basis by even mentioning people's names, their corporate person names. That is fraud. You have no right to administer a fraudulent contract from the beginning. So, bar, you need to cease and desist, you bunch of pedophiles, and stop your evil ways, because we want peace, and we will get peace, and we are David, and you are Goliath. So, with that, we'll look at closing up, guys, because I have to prepare for my new show. But thank you very much, and I'll talk to you off air. But Deitra's very keen to, I guess, have us back, and I am too, to do a follow-up on this. So thanks once again, everybody, for joining. And
thanks for having us, Santos.
Yes, thank you, Santos.
Yeah, go Santos.
Absolutely a pleasure to have you, folks, friends. And for listeners, we'll be back next week and do a follow-up. In the meantime, we're be free. You are free. There is no debt. It doesn't exist. It was always a fiction anyway. It was we that gave it the attention that it needed to exist. So be, and thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Most people would have.
You think so?
Yes. For what we've got, yes.
Well, as we all know, this went public on the 25th of December, and it took probably a week, I think, for word to really get around amongst the alternative media crowd, and for people to get our heads around what had taken place. And this has been a process that Heather, one of the trustees, has been going through for the last, say, 3 to 4 years, and used the process of foreclosure, used her own house, in fact, as the guinea pig for this, and used the process of foreclosure to take this case up through the system. Not too dissimilar to what James McBride did, using foreclosures. But they ended up in different places and using different processes. And where Heather ended up was with the UCC. And well, that's interesting. I just heard the Blog Talk Radio thing again. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, yep, still loud and clear.
Okay. For some reason it started coming through the computer again. Now, the situation that we seem to find ourselves in at the moment with these filings with the UCC is that they, as at today, they stand unrebutted. Now, most people who have done any kind of study with strawman and law and trust law and commercial law know that any claim that stands unrebutted becomes law, which is how these trusts started in the first place. And in order to now rebut them, from what we can make out, they have to do one of two things. They either have to invalidate the UCC, and by doing so, they actually invalidate themselves along with it, or they have to rebut these documents, which they can't, simply because the overwhelming evidence is there. So they're caught in a catch-22 at the moment, the powers that were.
Yeah, and can you explain why it is that if they rebut them, then they will be, basically standing against UCC, which they really have to be supporting, right?
Because UCC is the basis for all. Oh, Bob's with us too, by the sounds of things.
I think so.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Oh my goodness, I made it.
Welcome, Bob. How are you, brother?
How you doing, Santos? Great to be here.
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Actually, Chris can probably answer that question better, Santos.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, look, that's no problem because we've got plenty of time, no breaks, 2 hours straight. Welcome, Bob, and thank you for joining us. Now, what I've done, listeners, is I've gathered a small group of people that probably have the most knowledge, because People's Trust has only been out since December 25th. So we're all trying to learn as much as possible about it, and it appears that the guys that put it together are very, very busy. And would it be true in saying, guys, that they're probably spread out all over the world and keeping low profile at the moment? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I believe so. I know that one of them is in the United States. Another one is in Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
With the location of the third one, I'm not sure.
Alrighty. So let's do a bit of history then, Chris, if you can help us through that, and how I have heard a bit of Heather Tucci speaking, and how they went into court and tested out how the magistrates and judges are working in cahoots with the bankers. So they discovered all that, and of course Heather was a lawyer, and so good background in law. But I did learn how she went into court many, many times just testing things to see if this would work and that would work, and eventually they exposed and revealed and understood how the whole system works, and then they set about a plan to perfect the superior
man, woman, and I'm including both. You are an inheritor of that trust. You are a beneficiary of that trust. Everyone gets a portion of that trust. And no one can stand between you, yourself, and your creator. There's no other authority. So we're asking them, do you have a claim higher than the creators? You can. And thus it becomes unrebuttable.
Now, does this go back, Bob, to the papal bull Unum Sanctum by Boniface VIII?
This goes all the way back to, you're talking about all the way before that.
No, I know, but see, UCC and the Vatican and Rome and the whole system is actually, they're operating under a papal bull. Of course, that's the maximum authority they've got, right?
You're talking about.
Well, as you said in the beginning, it's superior to that trust. It's superior to that claim.
Right.
That's right.
That was the original claim. The Roman canon law and the papal bull, they made the original claim that they had gained the world through conquest, which they had.
Yeah,
and it stood unrebutted.
Yeah, exactly. So no one has perfected a superior claim since 1302, really. I mean, we know that they've had the game, since Nero's time and the Julian dynasty, and even before that, you can go back, and I've addressed all that. But the bulls are the ones that really, because that was the first express trust in history, 1302, according to, my research. So what do you know, Bob?
Well,
is that right?
In legal terms, yes, that was the primary claim. And everything, like they say, all roads led to Rome. Well, that's still true today. By and large, the Vatican is the largest holder of wealth in human history. So, all roads lead to Rome. But what they've done, what Heather is talking about by going back to prime, she's going all the way back to the dawn of creation.
Of course.
There's essentially been a reset. The system's been reset to prior to any of that.
Indeed. One of the places we can start at, just to sort of try and get into people's minds what the process that took place. It actually began. I missed a bit of the conversations because I had to do something, but I'm hoping I'm not repeating anything anyone said. The process began, really, there were some initial filings, but ultimately the thing that really kicked it off was the trustees resumed and reactivated the original public trust created by the original Constitution of the United States and then abandoned. And they rebonded themselves, or they bonded themselves to the trust, but they bonded the trust to the Creator. And the result is that the only players in this game, in this trilogy of this trust, are the Creator and the trustees and us as the beneficiaries. There's nothing else in play here. There is just that trinity, if you like. Would that be an accurate statement, Bob?
Perfect.
Okay,
and this is when you hear, if you're going through the documents and she talks about everything has to go back to prime, this is what she means. It's got to go back to the original trust that the Creator made with man.
Indeed. Now, the thing about that is that's never occurred before on this planet in terms of an organized government. The trusts that the Catholic Church created And I saw some details on the trusts originally, but I don't think they were structured the same way. Have you researched the actual structure that the Catholic Church trusts created, these Sesti KV trusts, Bob?
Yeah, the Sesti KV trusts were, and you're talking about, again, Babylonian slave system. It is if you study slave systems, this is probably the worst form of slave.
Welcome one and all to Freedom Reigns, Syncretism with Santos Bonacci. Thanks for joining, folks. Wonderful to be alive in this beautiful time that we're living in. We are certainly right into Aquarius, and it's absolutely beautiful to be alive. Today I have three guests, as I announced yesterday. I've got Lisa, Bob, and Chris joining me. I will welcome those in a minute. I just want to remind listeners, if you weren't tuned in yesterday, that this will be the last show that I do on Freedom Reigns, and I've been very, very appreciative and thankful of the opportunity. I appreciate every opportunity I get, and this has been a great opportunity presented to me by Diatra, and I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. I must move on because I do now have commitments in other languages, and I've always wanted to have an opening into Italy, and as most of the listeners probably know, I have had an opening into the Latin American with Johnny Guzman at Ecuador. With Johnny Guzman, sorry about that, just a little interruption, at Ecuador, and I've probably got about 30 presentations there, 1-hour interviews. So, but that's coming back on, and I'm very, very happy to announce that on Friday mornings, my time, I do Spanish, and Thursday mornings, my time, I do Italian. Now, most of you won't be interested in those languages, of course, but if you know friends or people that are stuck in sleepy land and have a good heart and a good mind and would love to know the answers, please put them onto my work. And I just hope that listeners continue to support Freedom Reigns. And of course, Diatra's always got excellent hosts, and that's all wonderful. So thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy today's show. Guests, are you there? Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Santos. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Morning.
Yep, good morning. Thanks for joining. You're in Australia. Chris, you're there. You're in Australia too.
Hi, Santos. Good morning to everybody. Yes, not in the same place as Lisa because it's a big country, but yes, closer to you actually, Santos.
Oh, yeah, we're only 20 minutes away from each other. So that's good, and much appreciated for sharing. And we've got Bob over in the States. You with us, Bob? Now, I think Bob's having a bit of a struggle getting on, so we'll just patiently wait for Bob, and we can kick it off, guys. What do you think? Probably Chris. If who can we do some? Well, put it this way. First of all, folks, we're talking about the Public People's Trust 1776.org if you want to get on the internet and learn more about this trust. We are now under a new trust. The group that has developed this and brought it to the world is a small group of people that hopefully we can have join us, but they have perfected a superior trust to the Vatican's and Rome's trusts and papal bulls, etc. We have a perfected Superior Trust. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about how we can take advantage of that, of course, and everything else. So, Chris, would you like to kick off, or do we have Lisa with the history?
Well, if Lisa wants to speak for a minute just about the sequence of events since the 25th of December, and what she knows of the history, because she's had a little bit of direct contact with one of the trustees, and has probably got a clearer picture than,
claim against it. So if you can do that, Chris, that'll be great.
Okay, well, you just about stated pretty much what I know too, Santos, because we really need to understand that there will be a time when assuming all goes well, which we absolutely hope it does, that the trustees come forward and tell their own story in their own words in great detail. And the information we've got at the moment from Heather, from that interview, and a little bit of stuff directly from Heather, is that the three trustees have been involved in UCC law for a long time and had a great understanding of it, and also a really deep understanding of how the powers that were actually using UCC to control the whole financial system at a very high level, including, we think, we did a little bit of cursory research on universities in this country and finding it difficult to find any references to teaching UCC in the curricula that we looked at. Now, we didn't look at all of them. We didn't find it anywhere, so we're kind of concluding they've kept UCC law inside the corporations and only teach it to people who actually have to use it in real life. So the only other people around the place who have experienced UCC law to any great depth are people like Heather, and there will be people like Winston Trout and all the other guys who've been doing sovereignty and strawman type work for many years, because ultimately they all end up arriving at the door of UCC and starting to try and use it. Not with a great deal of success from what we've gathered, and one of the reasons for that is that I don't think unless you're an operative in a corporate in UCC, I don't think you get to know much about it unless you find out the hard way, and for some people that's been quite hard. But the trustees sound like they were on the inside. They were doing corporate work in UCC and built up enough experience, and at the same time got a grip on how the powers that be were actually operating behind the scenes with UCC law, and decided what they appear to have done to us is set a massive trap, which the powers that were seem to have walked straight into. And based on incidents, information that's come up over the last week, we suspect the trap is about to completely close. And one of the things you need to understand about the UCC filings is that there's a sequence of events to it. The first thing to say about their website is that their website is not actually for public consumption. It was never really intended to explain to the people what the trustees have done, how they've done it in any great detail. It's actually the trustees publicly noticing the system as to the fact the filings have actually been completed up to a certain stage. And that's a requirement of the processes they were carrying out. They had to actually complete the public noticing, and what they did was simply tell us that where the site was, and there was stuff on it, and that's what happened on December 25th. Our attention was drawn to this site where they've been building up these filings. To examine the filings is a hard read. There's absolutely no doubt about that. They're all written in complex language. It's a mixture of legalese and English, and it takes some time to get the hang of actually, where to find the good bits in the documents, because there's a lot of repetitious stuff, a lot of cross-references to other documents. It's all pretty heavy going, but if you can get your head around some of it, then you can start to see what it is they've actually done. And it's relying completely on the standard kind of administrative process that many people who have been involved in dealing with corporations, because all the government's corporations, is in fact to make a claim against them and ask them to rebut the claim within a certain period of time, or they'll default. And then after the first period of time has elapsed, you actually notice them that they're in fault and remind them that they've been asked to rebut this claim. And if they after the second time period, they don't rebut. You actually put them into default. That's the very basic administrative process. And the UCC is a version of that. And I think the timing's a bit different, and certainly the terminology is different, but it's the same process. And once they're in default, in the case of a normal situation, just you and a corporation, you could go to a court with the documentation and ask for a summary judgment. In the case of UCC, it appears that it actually stands in law at that point until there's probably a process where you could attack it after the final default if you were the defaulter, but we're not clear on how that's done. But what is clear is that the trustees set up a sequence of situations where the powers that were in a position where they would default if they didn't rebut, and they didn't. So as far as we can tell, the document stands in law. Yeah, jump in, Bob.
One important thing for people to understand and to realize when you're talking about the Uniform Commercial Code, the Uniform Commercial Code is the Bible when it comes to commerce. And one of the things in this whole history, one of the things that Heather was working on, she was actually investigating certain papers, documents, and claims that were made for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And when she started to see a lot of the fraud that was going on, and understand everything in our world, in our system as we know it, is commerce. The government is all based on commerce. The court system is all based on commerce. The judge sits on a bench. When you look that legal term up in your Black's Law Dictionary, you'll find that bench actually means bank. They are administrating commerce. And so all the laws of the land eventually comes back down to the Uniform Commercial Code, the law of commerce. The world has become a market. And this is one of the things that you must understand when you're talking about the principles of law in our current system. It's all based on commerce. So anything that is entered into the Uniform Commercial Code, I mean, and you're talking about a mountain. It's probably a library unto itself. Just that if you were to print the code out, you probably would fill a whole bookshelf. I mean, you're talking about a mountain of statutes and codes that is very, very explicit and extremely precise in dictating how trade and commerce should be interacted internationally. So by filing these documents under the UCC code, and this is what they use as the basis for everything that they do. When they foreclose on your home, if they foreclose or they take your car or anything like that, they're using that same UCC process. So to a lot of people will say, oh, well, I've never heard of UCC and these filings don't mean anything. To invalidate the UCC filings would invalidate the entire system. It would invalidate all foreclosures. It would invalidate everything that the IRS does. It would invalidate tax collection. It would invalidate all of that because they're all governed by these laws. So they picked a forum with which to operate in that everyone around the planet recognizes. And this is something that is a public registry, so that once it becomes part of the public record, and if you know anything about law, when a claim is made and becomes part of the public record, when it is unrebutted, it becomes fact. It becomes true. And these claims are extremely explicit in what they're stating, that they are running private money systems. They are operating a slavery system, using debt and controlling the masses through commerce. And these claims that they're made are very distinct, and they can't really be rebutted. And another very interesting thing about these documents, why they're so, what I would say, bulletproof, is because they take the tact of making the claim that the original trust And we're talking about trust law. Whenever you're dealing with the transfer of any kind of property, you're talking about trust law and contract law. The original trust was between the Creator and the beings on earth. The Creator is the one who grants everything. And these documents literally tie us back to that original trust. The earth was given to man to dominate, take care of, to be custodians thereof. And every human being, therefore, as a living, breathing